Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is my commentary for the first episode of The Mummy, Secrets of the Magi, A New Beginning, Part 1. Is this Alex? Yes, it is Alex. He seems to have aged about 5 years. But nevertheless, here he is, doing his Magi training, or, as I've described it before, jumping through hoops for Ardeth Bay. And that's almost literally what Alex is doing here, except he's jumping across these submerged wooden stepping stones. But the effect is very much the same as jumping through hoops. It's absolutely pointless, and it does Alex no good whatsoever. Back to the wheelhouse to make a slightly unwise turn. 6 out of 10. Clearly they've been back to the movies for some more inspiration. While this is an understandable decision, I feel there was just the right amount of movie inspiration in there already, and that the show suffers somewhat as a result. Specifically, the inclusion of Anck Su Namun, with a suitably adjusted origin story, of course, and the whole issue of Evie's past life, which is begun here and then fully explored in the second episode of the 2-episode season opener, don't really benefit the show, in my opinion, and should have remained confined to the movies. Alex's Magi training has already messed with his head and certainly done more harm than good to his personal development, although it seems to have had a hand in speeding up his physical development to quite a degree. As in the first season, we see Alex at his very best when he's relying on his own skills and instincts, yet still Ardeth Bay claims credit for Alex's triumphs, which his dodgy Magi training scheme obviously has nothing to do with really. Yes, indeed, very apt words there. And here we are, with Ardeth, as I promised, talking absolute nonsense to Alex, and we see that Alex and his Magi training haven't gotten along too well together. We see a couple of shots of some of the other young Magi recruits there. Tantalizingly, Fadil is certainly there, standing in the kind of position that shows, once you know and look back, yes, he thinks he's cock of the walk. And there is one with a Janet-style headscarf, but as we know, that isn't actually Janet, because she's not there yet, as we know retrospectively. Imhotep's only just getting round to breaking out of this pile of boulders in the catacombs in Paris. As I've said, and I'm about to say again, the timing between the previous episode and this one is not at all clear, and doesn't really stand up to a lot of scrutiny. Here we find out what Colin has been up to between last season and this one. He's been selling homemade Mary Sue comic books on the street without a street vendor's license. And we also discover that Imhotep certainly does value Colin as an underling in some way, because he bothers coming to find Colin and picking him up and saying, "I demand your assistance." Now, as Colin is under no illusions about Imhotep wants him to do the grunt work, but he obviously feels that it's worth his while having Colin as an ally, as a servant. Which is quite interesting, but of course, really, we just need to restore the status quo of the series as closely as possible. And Colin says here, well, what are we going to do? The Scrolls of Thieves were burned. How are we going to take over the world? And Imhotep doesn't say here, well, actually, we're now going to destroy the world. I surely want to destroy the world. He says, I have discovered other ways to gain the kingdom that is rightfully mine. Yes, it's still conquest on his mind, not destroying the world. As usual, as I said in the previous commentary, Ardeth Bay was talking absolute nonsense. And here we go, he's looking for Anck Su Namun, as she's slightly differently referred to in the cartoon. As I say in the review, they've been back to the films for some inspiration, and, well, it's a mixed bag. You see there on the map of the UK, to show that we're off to the British Museum, they no longer want to commit to where England and Scotland are on the island of Britain, They just colour in the whole thing and call it UK. But of course Northern Ireland isn't coloured in, so it's not really the UK in the true sense of the term. And this scene is one I have referenced before, because it adds to the problems, issues with the time between the two series. As I have mentioned before, they're only just getting around to telling the curator about what happened in Paris and the loss of the Zephyr. If, as it appears, about 5 years have passed, you'd think he'd have been wondering for all that time. And this is indicative of the fact that, on paper, it was obviously planned that not that much time has elapsed between the two series. A few months, perhaps. A few months in which, as I say, Alex has aged 5 years. But here's the new Zephyr, which I've also mentioned before, as Evie's describing here with all its luxury extras, including Jonathan, and Rick's not pleased to see him. Poor old Jonathan does get rather misused at times in this series. He's had his moments, now he's going to have some non-moments, which really aren't very good for the character and don't make much sense. And we'll see one later in this episode, unfortunately. And here we have this bit at the Medjai Academy, where Alex is trying to cover up for the fact that he's regretting ever coming here and he hates his training, to Rick and Jonathan. And then Ardeth is having this chat with Evie, and what does Ardeth say? Skills are not what Alex lacks, it is his confidence that suffered. I mean, for goodness sake, Ardeth, whose fault is that? Yours. Entirely yours. In the previous series, Alex had both skills and confidence to a high degree and did a lot of great stuff. And what's happening now? Your crappy Magi training scheme has eaten away at his confidence, and he's now a shadow of his former self, I think it's fair to say. Damn you, Ardeth, and damn your Magi training. Here we see Alex with his adjusted Season 2 costume. We've already seen him in his Magi pyjamas, which I don't think is that good a look for him. But this look in his adventuring clothes, family adventuring clothes, is a very good look for him. He is, quite literally, out of short trousers, and I think the long trousers do suit him much better than the shorts. As I said, the look was carefully crafted in the first season, the shorts were fine, and they certainly do fit in with him being younger there, and older, a young man in this season, quite literally out of short trousers, and there he is, with his long trousers. His height isn't always consistent in this. In the shot earlier there, he was as tall as Jonathan and almost as tall as Rick, and then here, as they find Imhotep and Weasler, Alex is not quite as tall as Evie, even. But what we can tell for certain is that Alex is a young man now. He's very buff now, and this is the story, principally, of his journey. The Mummy, Secrets of the Magi, does use Alex really as the main character a lot of the time, or even most of the time. And as I've said before, that's a good thing. But there are other things about the transition to Secrets of the Magi for the series that aren't so good, as I've mentioned in my review there. And I do think going back to the movies and picking out Anck Su Namun and Princess Nefertiti, it was rather unnecessary and doesn't gel that well, as I'll go on to discuss when it becomes more relevant to what's going on the screen. This part made me think about Alex in the previous episode, rushing in with great confidence, using the manacle with great skill to attack Weasler and Imhotep. And what a difference here! The Magi training has messed with Alex's head so much, he really doesn't have the confidence to do anything at the moment. He's just kind of running away from these warriors that Imhotep has conjured up. And that's very disappointing to see after all the great work Alex has done so far. He's completely lost confidence in himself, and it's all Ardeth's fault. Ardeth said in the previous episode to Alex, the discipline and focus of the Magi training will help you in your mastery of the manacle. What he should have said was, the discipline and focus of the Medjai training, which is a load of rubbish anyway, will make you completely lose your confidence and cause you to become a shadow of your former self. Because that's what's happened, extremely disappointingly. And throughout this episode, Ardeth is trying to encourage Alex to use his crappy training, including on this bit, the trigger button to release the cage. And Alex is like, well, when you can't rely on your instincts, rely on the manacle. And he uses Medjai to bring the cage down on the warriors. Now, it's kind of presented that this was a bad thing to do. He should have relied on his instincts and chosen the correct trigger stone, because it makes a kind of roof fall, and Alex collapses to the floor, saying, wow, that was exhausting. Guess I'd better be more careful using the manacle in future. But really, I think Alex was right there. His instincts told him, well, I better use the manacle here. That's what I'm good at. That's what I know I can do, and who's to say there wouldn't have been a roof cave-in anyway? And Ardeth is like, yes, you must rely on your Medjai training more. Well, I would, Ardeth, if it wasn't such a load of nonsense. And here we go, off to the Lake of Eternity, which is kind of like a weekly MacGuffin. It's a MacGuffin place, rather than MacGuffin object. And of course, what Imhotep is trying to do there, as we may have supposed by now, is what he's always trying to do in the movies, resurrect Anck Su Namun. And he's so different in the cartoon than in the movies. It's not something he's tried to do yet, but he does do it here once in the cartoon. And, as I say, adding Anck to the series, it's rather unnecessary, rather pointless, I think. I say Imhotep is rather limiting as a character, as an antagonist, because all he does is just kind of hang around and shout and say evil things and attempt to do evil things, and Anck Su Namun is very much the same as him, except she's even more pointless, has even less of an established place in the series, very unclear goals, unclear real characteristics. She just doesn't really add anything to the show. Mountain come alive. That's a useful power, isn't it? No need for the starter set there. And as we see, this Zephyr, despite being new and full of extra goodies, is just as vulnerable to attack as the previous one, and it's already been half destroyed. Corlin was carrying Anck Su Namun's coffin up the cliff there, and that was the bit I was mentioning in another commentary, where Corlin says Imhotep can turn into a whirlwind any time he wants, but not now. Quite an amusing wry aside there. And there's Jonathan's anti-moment that I was talking about. He's been left to drive the Zephyr, and then for absolutely no reason, apart from lazy writing, trying to be funny with Jonathan and using him very badly, he decides he's going to say, ooh, I wonder what this lever does. Pulls it and detaches the rope ladder that everyone's on at the time, and they all fall off. And he just does it out of whimsy, caprice. That is a shame to see Jonathan used so carelessly and so badly, and it's not the only time it's going to happen in the series. Poor old Jonathan, he does suffer. Not only doesn't get his moments, he gets moments of being completely stupid. Not so good. Now here we see that Alex's confidence is increasing, and he comes up with this plan to bobsled on this log to chase Imhotep. And why has Alex's confidence increased? Why has he got some of his old swagger back and looking rather pleasingly heroic? Because he's out in the field, thinking on his feet, doing practical things in a practical situation to actually achieve a goal that's important to him. And that's, as I always say, when Alex is at his best. Not jumping through hoops or jumping across stupid wooden pole stepping stone things for Ardeth. And here we go. Was it Imhotep who actually resurrected Anck Su Namun? Well, it was more Rick, really, wasn't it? Rick says, I guess I should have thought that through more carefully. He leaves the log to crash into Imhotep, and what happens? Anck Su Namun is thrown into the Lake of Eternity, and thus resurrected. And here they discuss, Ardeth and Evie, Anck Su Namun's history, which of course is a new history, an alternative history, to what happened in the first two movies, The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. So, we already knew, or could infer, that the cartoon continuity has a similar but different parallel universe history to the movie continuity, and now we know, Rick saying we didn't make a good first impression, things like that. Now we know that the continuity in this cartoon universe didn't involve Anck Su Namun in any way, because this is the first time they've met her. So, what was Imhotep's motive for everything he's done in his previous adventures with the O'Connells in this continuity? Well, just like in the cartoon itself, he's an evil high priest who wants to rule the world. Not destroy the world, rule the world. And that's all he's ever wanted. Now this is important, remember this, Jonathan comes across this secret, secluded part of the Lake of Eternity and fills a water bottle with some of the water. We'll need to know that, remember that, later. And again, you'll see shades of The Mummy Returns here, with Evie and Anck doing this cane fight. Very much what they were up to in the second movie, in that alternative continuity. And we're going to get some foreshadowing. Anck Su Namun says to Evie, look on the bright side, perhaps one day you will be resurrected. Yes, maybe even sooner than you think. And what does Alex do here? In the heat of battle, he shows his great skills and confidence again, and he wraps up the legs of this stone crab that Anck has made, pulls it off its feet, and smashes it to pieces. And what does Ardeth say there? Now that is the confidence of a Magi. Up yours, Ardeth. He's claiming credit there for Alex's great work, skills and confidence that Ardeth has had absolutely nothing to do with. If anyone spurred Alex into that great heroic feat, it was Rick, chucking Alex the rope and saying, Alex, rodeo. It's his family, compelling family teamwork that gives Alex the confidence to use his strength and skills to great effect, not you, Ardeth, and your Medjai training. I mean, I find that really quite annoying, that bit. Alex finally gets his skills and confidence back, does one of his great heroic feats towards the end of the episode here. Good stuff. I'd put that in a compilation of Alex's greatest moments. And what happens? Ardeth claims credit for it. Whereas really, it's Alex clawing his way back to where he was before Ardeth got anywhere near him and messed with his head. Quite annoying. And here again Ardeth is messing with Alex's head. Find the geyser, you know where it's going to pop up. And Alex does, because of the renewed confidence he now has in himself that has absolutely nothing to do with Ardeth. I scored this episode 6 out of 10, and that's a fair score. As I was mentioning, I'd mostly scored the episodes in the first season 7, 8, 9 and 10. There was only one of them, the penultimate episode, that I scored less than that, 5. But in this series, I've scored a lot of them around 4, 5, 6. There's 2 10s, which are my very favourite episodes of all. There's a 9, there's an 8, I think there's a 7, but there's a lot round the 4, 5 and 6 marks, and there's even a 3 and a 2. This series has higher peaks and lower troughs than the first series in my opinion, but a lot of the time it just hovers around the middle being not that good, and that's where we are at the moment. You'll notice the episode doesn't leave us with the cliffhanger of Evie is actually dead, just that she's been crushed by the crab shell and she's very seriously wounded. What are we going to do about that? Well, perhaps we might have worked it out, particularly if we've seen The Mummy Returns, but we'll find out for certain in the next episode. That one, of course, was written by Tom and Greg, and, well, there are certain things about it where you could have done better, Tom and Greg, and I'm sure they'll be writing the next episode as well, where we'll continue many aspects of this fascinating discussion in the commentary for A New Beginning, Part 2.